One of the greatest attainment of mine has been my education besides my spirituality. Among the earlier five books that I've been mentioning you many times by now, there is one book called Overcoming Suffering, which is the part two of my trilogy called The Unified Theory of Motivation and Living. In this book, I focused on consciousness. It was defined in my book as the way we perceive or see the world, the way we react to the various events in the world, and the way we perform in it. That book was inspired by my own spiritual journey and as well as the thousands of counseling sessions I had with students and professionals alike. In that book, I focused on what was suffering, why people suffer, and how we can overcome suffering. So it was mainly about how to be happy kind of book, but it didn't provide any quick fixes like you'd find in self-help books. It was filled with a lot of theories, concepts. Many more books would have to be written based on that foundation that I created in that book. So you can say it dealt more with the emotional side of people. This book is less inspired by my own spiritual journey and more by the problems I had to solve in my counseling sessions. I realized the students had got a lot of emotional problems, but they also had an intellectual problem. Based on my interactions with students on a one to one basis, I found that while 20% had genuine emotional issues that was caused either by their own predispositions or by external factors like your family, career, relationships, and so on. The other 80% had problems related to cognition. They were supposed to study, but they could not study. They wanted to score high marks, but they couldn't score. They tried to study, but it just didn't get into their heads. They tried to memorize, but it just evaporated. Amazingly, every intellectual problem that the students brought to me, I found a solution. At the beginning, the problems were so diverse that I just couldn't make sense of it, as I've been telling you earlier. But over the years, I realized that they followed a certain pattern. And the reason I could find a solution for their problem was that even though I didn't know it, I had the correct model or concept of education. So over the next years, I worked on developing the model or framework, of which the main component are the four components of education that you have just learned in this chapter. In this last section, I just want to connect this book and the third book of mine called Overcoming Suffering. There are many things that affect our level of happiness, and among them is our cognitive capacity. And this is just what I wanted to illustrate through the diagram that you see. First, let me explain to you the diagram on the left hand side, which constituted of the information, skill, knowledge, and wisdom boxes. So what it is telling is that we are made to experience various things in our lives, various events and desires. These input, be it from inside of us or outside of us, are absorbed by our intelligence or cognition. Then they are processed as information, When the person is educated, he would have some skills to interpret this information. If that person has got more education, he would have the knowledge to understand the causality of that information. And still, if he has more education, he would have the wisdom to do something with that information that is innovative. This is what I've been teaching you in various ways uh, up till now. So far, the input was related to studies with subjects like English, Nepali, math, science, and so on. But the input can be other things like the mountain in front of us, the newspaper, the vehicle. Also, it could be events in our lives like getting hired in a job, not getting promoted, getting married. The inputs can also be the desires that we develop when we watch an ad. For example, when we see a superstar wearing a certain brand of clothing, we have the desire to also have such a dress. So you realize that I'm trying to generalize this cognitive capacity of information, skill, knowledge, and wisdom to a broader aspect, which is of living. What an educated person will be able to do is to interpret all those input with his intelligence in order to alter his perception and reactions and performance so that he can find happiness, make the right decisions, and decrease the chances of regret. As a whole, it's all about overcoming suffering using education. In my earlier book of the same name, Overcoming Suffering, I dealt with mental, spiritual, behavioral, and emotional aspects of living in order to overcome suffering. The book was already very long, over 800 pages, so there was no more place to add the cognitive or intellectual component. Also, but at that time, this knowledge that I expounded here wasn't ready. And then I came up with the four brain approach of learning to solve the studies problem of students. Then I realized that I use the same cognitive framework to not suffer myself. I will not be going into more detailed exposition of this particular linkage between the two books or between cognitive capacity and emotional well-being, because it would be beyond the scope of this book and will make it unnecessarily lengthy, resulting to the loss of an audience for which this book is aimed at. However, I had to mention the connection between the two books for people who wanted to pursue their quest towards happiness and transcendence of suffering. You need to have a strong intelligence to do that, and this book is a great resource to attain that goal also. The next diagram on the right talks about the same thing as earlier, except that I have added more sets of the same four components of education. What I try to say is that the really educated person will be able to interpret, make use, understand, and synthesize the input received from the world from many point of views or subjects, fields, in order to come to the best perception, reaction, and performance. For example, continuing with my favorite situation of getting sick, which I've used many times earlier, you can use the four components of education in the field of health and medicine to determine the symptoms, the causes, and the solution. Then you can use the four components of psychology to determine a psychological angle to that sickness. You could also use the four components of the field of history to put that sickness in the perspective of time, that is historic time. Then you could also use the four components of education in the field of spirituality to understand the karmic chain involved and the karmic resolution for that particular sickness. Well, in this way, you realize that the really educated person having so many frames of reference and the knowledge or the four components of education in so many fields can come up with the perfect ideas and solutions in the form of the best way to see at the things, events, and desires, reacting to them, and performing in the world. I know I might be sounding a bit cryptic in this particular subsection, but the subject matter that I'm covering here is so complex and abstract that it will take me many more pages, which I do not want to dedicate in this book. So, for anyone who has read this far and which is reading this particular section, this is the signpost that there is a long way further to go to integrate cognition with suffering, and there is a very strong relation between the two. So instead of me trying to delve into the details and explain the mechanics of how the four components of education are related to the process of overcoming suffering, I will just give you here the outcome of the state whereby somebody is able to do that, linking between the two. So, the first outcome I want to talk about is how such a person would see or perceive the world. When the person is really educated, which means that he has mastered the four components of education across many fields represented by the sets in the diagram, then he can perceive the world as an equilibrium or a harmony in the making. He can see the unifying aspect in every thing, events. He can see from anybody's perspective. For him, nobody is wrong and nobody is fully right. He sees that there is nothing without a cause, and there is nothing you can do that will have no effect. There are some effects that are so minor that it seems not to exist, but there are effects. In the eyes of a really educated person, the world is neither something to crave for nor something to run away from. Whatever he sees in it, it's physics, chemistry, biology, geography, economics, mathematics, archaeology, anthropology in it. He sees that there is much more than the physical attributes. He reveals the quantum possibility of that object and its cosmic origin. In this way, the really educated person marvels at everything. Many people ask me, do you ever get angry? I don't really remember a time when I was angry. Yes, I showed anger at times because that was the correct thing to do. I might have been filled with adrenaline, but it always felt difficult for me to stay angry for a long time. This is because I had this cognitive capacity to look from various perspectives and thus to react very calmly. How can you ever react inappropriately when you know the story behind any negative incident in your life? Also, the really educated person will have mastered the four components of education in the field of emotional intelligence itself. So, such a person would find it very hard to be anything else but calm, composed. It's very difficult for such a person to be highly elated because he knows such a thing doesn't last. With so much knowledge of history and the contemporary news, as well as the psychology and the various sciences, the reaction of the really educated person is highly measured. All the reaction that such a person shows are calculated so as to produce the least possible negative karma and highest possible balancing karma of past misdeeds. The really educated person has very little to fear and equally little to be fearless about. He is in this way always in equilibrium because using the four components of education, his reactions are synchronized with the cosmic play. The really educated person reacts with the only objective not to be entangled, not to get in trouble, and yet not to be walked all over. Balance is the main objective of the really educated person and his reactions. Having mastered the four components of education in various fields, the really educated person will perform his daily duties and activities in a systematic, scalable, and progressive manner. He will approach any activities to be performed from multiple angles. As a family man, he will not only be aware of his own needs, but the needs of other family members because he has mastery of many fields. He will be able to know what governs the behavior, desires, mindsets, values of other family members. He would have the skills to solve the problems in relationships. The strategies that he will use will be aimed to create harmony in the family. The really educated person knows that unless his performance at home isn't good or at least good enough, then nothing else would matter, especially at work and in the community. The really educated person will always act knowing that he's bound to make mistakes at any point because there are so many unknowns and he can minimize them only to a certain extent. In this way, he's always prepared to correct his mistakes, be it at home or work. There is an incomparable grace about the really educated performance and his dance in the play of life. His elegance is unparalleled. That is because of his highly evolved intellectual capacity that is again based on the so many sets of the four components of education he has mastered. In this way, I end this chapter on what it really means to be educated and the four components of education. I know this particular last section has been a bit discontinuous as opposed to the earlier flow of my writing. But again, it was meant for the few who have their feet on both worlds, which is that of the intellect and of the emotion. To them, this subsection is more than enough to serve as the key to their quest in linking the brain to the heart. Again, this is beyond the scope of this book, and that is why I made this subsection so short and as a result so enigmatic. Maybe and hopefully not to the point of being confusing and boring. If it has been so, again, my apologies. And I'm sure that you will enjoy the next chapter much more than this subsection.